I'm here with park naturalist Lisa Sanchez. She is going to teach us all about edible bugs. Okay, here you go, Lisa.
Great, thank you. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Yes, we're going to learn about the insects you can eat. And there are a few insects that are poisonous that we cannot eat, and I'll talk about those also. And then at the end, I'll be cooking some up for those of us who are here in the room to have some snacks. Well, as we get started, one of the first things I want to do is make sure that you all know what is an insect. Well, of course, an insect is an animal who has 3 body parts. All insects have a head, where the eyes and the antennas are located. All insects have a thorax, where the 6 legs, 3 pairs of legs, and the 2 pairs of wings, for a total of 4 wings, are located. And then the abdomen, also known as the butt of the insect. That's the part we need to stay away from on some insects. Even some of those stinging insects are edible. And I'll talk and let you know how to cook those up without getting stung. Well, if we take a look at ants, ants come in all different sizes. Ants come in all different colors. The dark black carpenter ants, they're my favorite. They're the ones who have a nice nutty flavor to them. And wherever there is one ant, there's more than just one ant close by. Not only will you find ants, but if you disturb the ant colony, you will also find the larvae, the baby ants. They're also edible. The ants you're looking at right here, which have a light yellow, golden color to them, well, they're my favorite. They're the ones when I'm in the garden and I'm pulling the unwanted wildflowers, and all of a sudden I smell lemons. But I know I didn't just pull up some lemongrass or another plant that smells like lemons. I can look down, I can see lots of these golden ants all over the roots of the plant I just pulled, and I know I get to take those ants home for dinner. That means I not only get those vegetables from my garden, but I also get protein. See, insects are high in protein, low in fats and carbohydrates, so someday, hopefully, it'll become a new diet craze because they are good for us, and we should all be eating insects on a regular basis. Now, in other countries, they actually do eat insects on a regular basis. It's here in North America that we shy away from eating those insects. Termites. Well, let me actually ask you all a question and think about this. If we took every animal on the planet, all the mammals, all the fish, all the birds, all the scaly reptiles, and we put them in a pile over here, and we took just insects and put them in a pile over here, which pile would have more animals in it? All the animals or just the insects? That's right, just the insects. That pile would be larger and have more animals in it. Now, if we took this insect all by itself, the termite, and we put them in a pile, and we put the humans in another pile, which pile would weigh more? All the humans on the planet or all the termites on the planet? I know, you want it to be the humans, but it's not. Those termites outweigh us humans. And if we look closely at some of these termite mounds that fill Africa and other countries, not right here in Lebanon County, we don't have termite mounds like this, unfortunately. Or inside that termite mound, we would be able to find hundreds of pounds of termites to eat. Now on that last picture back here, you see termites have wings. Well, they're the ones who leave the mounds and head out, but the worker termites, they're the ones that stay in the mound. They're the ones we can find here in our backyard. Hopefully not on your house eating the wood, but in a wood pile, in rotting wood, you'll find termites. And it's the workers who don't have their hard exoskeleton yet, who don't have wings. Their body is soft. They remind me and they taste a lot like the custard inside a donut. But minus all the sugar and all the fat that's in that custard, you can just have those termites. The termites also give me a good opportunity to show you that some insects have very large mandibles. That's their mouth part. That's what they use to chew their food. And a good entomophagist, yes, someone who eats insects, is called an entomophagist, like someone who studies insects is called an entomologist. So I'm an entomophagist. I'm kind of an entomologist because I like to study them also, but I prefer to eat them. I always pop the heads off of any insect that has large mandibles that could bite me first. Okay? Also, all the insects that we are eating should be cooked before you eat them. Occasionally, insects can have actually other insects on them, and those are parasites. And we definitely don't want parasites that are alive in our bodies. So by cooking them, that gets rid of any of those parasites. Just like all the insects you're going to eat, before you cook them, those insects must be alive. Yes, the insects I brought along with me today are alive. These are the mealworms. They are still crawling around. And the crickets, well, they're over in a tote with a lid on it because they like to jump out before they end up in the hot pot that they're going to go in shortly. Now I know some of you are out there saying there is no way, and I'm glad I'm not there, to eat those insects. But do any of you eat shrimp and lobster? Well, they're insects. Okay, scientifically they are crustaceans. They're insects. They have a hard exoskeleton. Look at those legs that they have. And people pay a lot of money to eat shrimp and lobster. People also pay money to eat the smaller version of a lobster that we can find here locally in our creeks and streams called crayfish. If we were down in Louisiana, they call them crawdads. And they have huge crawdad boils where they cook up a lot of them, and everyone fights over the head of the crayfish because that's where the most flavor is. The most meat is in the tail. Now, if you notice that crayfish, just like a lobster, when you cook it, it turns red in color. That's okay, that's what happens. And then we remove the hard exoskeleton before we eat the meat on the inside. If we were in other countries' markets, they're not going to have hamburgers and hot dogs like our markets have. They're going to have insects on sticks. Insects in all of the food. I know someday I want to go to Thailand just to eat the bugs. Because the bugs in Thailand are the size of your hand. And that's a whole meal all in one large grasshopper from Thailand. Some of you may have seen these wonderful lollipops with scorpions in them. It's my favorite way to eat a lollipop. You get that wonderful sweet flavor from the lollipop candy, and then you get the nice crunchy flavor of the scorpion. You could put crickets or cicadas or cockroaches in that lollipop and I would be happy. You also may have seen before where you can buy small little packets of mealworms, where the mealworms are already roasted. Well, the thing I don't like about those little packets is that they then add flavoring. Barbecue sauce, sour cream and onion flavoring. Well, that's what you end up tasting. When I cook my insects to eat, I am going to just cook them, no oil, no flavoring. That way you get the full flavor of the insect. Now this is actually a bucket of roasted mealworms that people buy for chickens, bluebirds. I raise the mealworms I'll be cooking today, not only for myself to eat, but for the bluebirds that live in my yard to also eat. So they are available out there. Then we take a look at the honeybee. The honeybee, of course, loves to visit the flowers and collect nectar. How many of you like to eat honey? I know I love eating that honey. But when I eat that honey, if I look closely on the inside of that jar of honey, chances are I'm going to find a leg that fell off of a honeybee, or a wing that fell off of the honeybee and is still in the honey that I'm going to eat. Now if we think about that honeybee, and we think about it collecting the pollen all over its legs, and it collects the nectar and takes it back to the hive in order to make that honey. Well, how does the honeybee get the nectar from the flower to the hive? I've never seen a honeybee carrying buckets of nectar back to the hive. The honeybee actually has a special stomach called the honey stomach. Well, it holds that nectar in its honey stomach, it goes back to the hive, and the only way to get something out of your stomach is to regurgitate. Okay, to throw up. So, honey could be called bee vomit. Wait, but that wouldn't go over so well on the jar, and people probably wouldn't buy the honey labeled bee vomit. Now you have to remember that that honey that the bees are making isn't actually intended for us humans, although we can eat it, it tastes great, but it's actually intended to feed the baby honeybees when they're in their larva stage inside those honeycombs. That's what that honey is for. So I'm definitely not encouraging you to go out and gather honeybees and cook and eat those honeybees, because we need those honeybees to pollinate all of our fruits and vegetables to make sure that we have more food for us to eat and more food for the other insects to eat. If you've ever brought an orange or a peach in the house, or even here in the summertime, a tomato, and about 3 days later, because you didn't eat that peach or that tomato, you end up with fruit flies. Yeah, those fruit flies will lay their eggs on our fruit. We won't even know it, and we'll go and we'll eat the tomato or we'll eat that peach. And that's how you're getting extra protein. Now, all of you out there, I can guarantee that each and every one of you today has already eaten an insect. Not one that you pick up from outside and eat, but if you ate bread today, you ate an insect. If you ate your favorite condiment, ketchup, you've eaten an insect today. Or if you've eaten your favorite dessert, chocolate. Every 100 grams of chocolate has 56 insect parts in it. And it's actually what gives chocolate protein. So you need to thank those insects for being in that chocolate that we are eating. Every peanut butter and jelly sandwich has insects in the bread, in the peanut butter, and in the jelly, for a total of 86 insect parts for every peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But you couldn't see those insects, because when we harvest our food, when we go out and we bring in those tomatoes, when we bring in the strawberries, or it's corn season, take a look at that cob of corn before you take a bite next time and see if there's any corn weevils or caterpillars crawling on it. Because when they make lots of jellies and spaghetti sauce and ketchup, no one is required to check to make sure that there aren't any bugs on those foods before they get turned into the jelly or the tomato sauce or the ketchup. And the U.S. Department of Agriculture, who inspects all of our food, says it's okay that our food has some insect parts in it, because we can eat them. They're healthy. Again, they give us that protein in that food. But you don't only have to eat that processed food in order to find insects in your food. If you have rice Oftentimes when we buy the rice or the pasta, in that rice and that pasta, there's little caterpillars. Caterpillars that will become grain moths. And so in there you might see the larva, there's the caterpillar of the grain moth. If you leave your rice or oatmeal or pasta or even a bag of nuts around for too long, they come crawling out of that food and then they turn into the moth. So yeah, when we're cooking all of our food, there's going to be insects in it. That is, if it's food that grew outside. Okay, all of our food grows outside. So when you harvest that wheat and bring it in, there's going to be insects on it. And it's okay. Even when you're at your next picnic and you pick up a piece of watermelon to eat, and you see what looks like a seed, but all of a sudden it moves. It's the fly coming to the picnic and joining you at that picnic. Don't worry, flies are edible. The larvae of flies, though, called maggots, they look like little caterpillars. They will also pupate into a small little cocoon there. All those stages are edible. Now I'll be honest with you, every insect in this presentation I have eaten myself, except for maggots. I've eaten the adult fly, I've eaten the pupa, the maggots just crawling around. Haven't needed to do that yet. But I know that if I'm ever in a survival situation, lost in the wilderness, and the only thing there is to eat are maggots somewhere, I'm going to eat them. Good thing I know all the plants and nuts I can eat also, so that I don't have to eat those maggots until I really need to. But they are edible. I started, the very first picture was a cockroach, because cockroaches are everywhere. Hopefully not in your house, but outside in a wood pile. In the woods, under rotting logs, you'll find wood cockroaches and American cockroaches. And at every stage of their life, they are edible. The one thing that the cockroach does that I can show you is that it shows the barbs on their legs. Sticky grabbing hooks that are on their legs that help them be able to move. Some insects, it helps them be able to make their different sounds. Some insect eaters like to remove the legs because those barbs can be a little scratchy. When I cook up the crickets later, oftentimes the legs just fall off of the insect, and the crickets that I'll be cooking don't have quite the sharp barbs on their legs. So pull those legs off so you don't get scratched before you eat them. My favorite cockroach, though, is one from Madagascar. The Madagascar hissing cockroach. It's the size of your hand. It tastes just like a piece of shrimp, minus the salty water flavor that you get in a shrimp. Madagascar hissing cockroaches, it's a good big meal. Some of you might recognize these exoskeletons, these shells that this insect crawls out of. Now, this is the cicada. Every year we get the Dog Day cicada, who is green in color. This year's a special year. The periodic cicadas have hatched out. The 17-year periodic cicada here in Lebanon County. I'm from Lancaster County. We have them down there, head a little further south, and the periodic cicadas for about 3 weeks kind of take over by the millions. Well, that's when I get excited, because I can go out with an insect net. I can collect hundreds and hundreds of periodic cicadas. I can put them in a jar of pickle juice, seal them up, and I can eat them in January when no one else is eating cicadas. Or I can put them in the freezer and eat the cicada later. But every year we get the green Dog Day ones. So if you don't have the periodic cicada right now in your backyard, Well, that means it wasn't in your backyard 17 years ago, and it won't be there 17 years from now, but the yearly one will be there. My favorite way, though, to eat the cicadas is at nighttime. When they're crawling out of the ground, and they go up the tree, and that's where the adult comes out of the old shell. The shell is what you find left on the tree. Now that exoskeleton shell, we don't want to eat that. No nutritional value in there. But the adult just emerging is still soft, and it tastes just like asparagus at that stage. Later, once it dries out and it gets its wings, my favorite way to eat those cicadas is roasted over a campfire. They taste way better than a marshmallow at that stage. And if you eat the wings on them, not everyone likes to eat the wings on insects. I like the wings. They're crunchy. They remind me a little bit of popcorn. You know, when you eat popcorn, it gets stuck in your teeth and you have a snack for later. Yeah, that happens with the wings of insects. So enjoy those cicadas when they're out there. Cook them over a fire, or you can cook them also the same way I'm going to cook the mealworms and the crickets in a little while. Now, there are some insects we don't want to eat. In the wild, red is an indicator of things being poisonous. Many berries in the wild that are red are poisonous. I know strawberries and raspberries are red, but scientifically they're not berries, they're drupes. And they are edible, but a lot of other berries on trees and on plants, stay away from those red colored berries. Stay away from the red insects. Ladybugs. Out of her feet comes a poison. It's bitter tasting. Now, if you've ever had a ladybug hit you in the lip while you're riding a bike or something, that's not going to kill you, but you may have tasted the bitter taste. And the reason poisonous insects like the ladybug or the milkweed beetle are bitter to the taste is because they are poisonous, and that way you won't eat many of them. Birds also don't eat the ladybugs and the milkweed beetle. The milkweed beetle is actually eating the sap from the milkweed plant, and since the sap from the milkweed plant is poisonous, that's what makes the milkweed beetle poisonous. Now, not an edible insect, but I have to ask you to think about this. Milkweed is, of course, the plant that a really important caterpillar eats. That becomes a really important butterfly. Anyone think they know that wonderful butterfly who, because the caterpillar eats the milkweed, the butterfly is poisonous, and the orange and black color tell the birds not to eat it? That's right, the monarch butterfly, the one who migrates. So if you see milkweed, look for those monarch caterpillars, but also look for those milkweed beetles. Just don't eat them. So as we take a look at this large beetle, which has a really hard exoskeleton, and if you notice, it has quite the mandibles, like the termites had, you don't want to eat the beetle. That hard exoskeleton on an insect is just like your fingernails. The material of our fingernails and the material covering an insect is called chitin. We don't eat our fingernails, so we don't eat the hard exoskeleton beetles. Just now, Japanese beetles have started hatching out. We don't eat the adult because it has that hard exoskeleton, but we can eat the grub, the larva of it. For me, in my garden, it's one of the best ways to control the population of those unwanted Japanese beetles and other beetles by eating the larva. Oh, and if you're drooling right now because that grub is so big, complete meal by eating just one, we have to go to Africa to eat the witchetty grubs. Sago grubs, a whole skewer of them. What a perfect meal. This picture picture I took one day in my garden where I had a bag of leaves sitting for a few days, and I picked the bag of leaves up, and underneath, look at all those grubs that were making a home underneath that bag. I had a whole good meal to take home with me that evening. Lots of fresh grubs. Even throughout the seasons, insects are active and abundant for us to be able to eat. This is an acorn weevil, and the acorn weevil lays its egg in acorns. And if you gather up acorns in the fall of the year and you let them sit for a couple of days, out come all the little grubs. Now, some people like to use these to go fishing, to catch a fish they're going to eat for dinner, whereas I like to just roast them in a hot pan. They have a wonderful nutty flavor to them. And I bet a lot of you can recognize this bug, which has been around and here forever, but you probably recognize it more in the brown stage. This is the brown marmorated stink bug. That's right. The adult brown marmorated stink bug is edible, and it tastes the same way it smells. Okay, it tastes like cilantro. Cilantro is an herb, like dill or oregano, but cilantro you often add to tacos and nachos and stuff. Or I like to take my stink bugs and turn them into cookies. Next time you get cookies somewhere, pay attention. Make sure that they are chocolate chips on top. Because if you come to my house, they might be stink bugs or even grasshoppers on top of those cookies. Back out in our gardens, if you're growing tomatoes, then you are going to have this caterpillar, the tomato hornworm, who actually becomes a beautiful moth. But the tomato hornworm likes to eat tomato plants. I don't mind when the tomato hornworm is nibbling on the leaves of the tomato plant. I don't eat the leaves. But when the tomato hornworm starts to eat the tomatoes, well, then they come home for dinner. Okay, they come home and become dinner. They go into a pot. And as you roast them up, the horn falls off, or you can snap it right off. And of course, they taste like juicy, wonderful tomatoes. On a good day, I'll get tomato hornworms from the garden. I'll get some grubs from the garden. I'll get a few stink bugs and put them all in a taco shell. And I have a complete meal that night from the insects that were feeding on the plants in my garden. Silkworms. Historically making silk, the silk moth would lay its egg and become the caterpillar, and the caterpillar would make this wonderful cocoon, and the silk on the outside was used to make fabric. Well, the inside here, the pupa, that's the delicacy. That's what people eat, a whole plate of silkworm pupa. Now, I'm not encouraging you locally to go out and collect butterflies and moths or their pupa or chrysalises, because butterflies and moths, of course, need our help. There aren't that many of them. So stick to eating the insects that are out there in abundance, like the cicadas and the grasshoppers and the crickets and the grubs. And let the pupa of a butterfly or moth continue to become the adult. Just like the honeybee that I mentioned before, our pollinating insects, even yellow jackets and paper wasps and bald-faced hornets or even bumblebees. Yeah, we can eat them if you need to eat them, but they're the ones we should allow to be out there pollinating the flowers, guaranteeing and making more fruits and vegetables and nuts for us to eat. But if you do find yourself in a situation where you need to eat those yellow jackets or even the bumblebees, and you gather them up safely, they are best boiled in water. That way the water releases the stinger. It also releases the mandibles, and then you can eat them without being stung. And they all have a sweet taste to them, kind of like the honey that the honeybees make. One of our larger edible insects here in your backyard, the praying mantis. I know, I'm sure there's somebody out there saying, you can't eat those, you can't kill those. They're endangered species. They're not endangered species. There is no $100 or $300 fine for killing a praying mantis. Actually, the European and the Chinese mantis that we have here in our backyards that start their life off in their egg case, the big green ones, they're not native. They were brought here in the 1940s and 50s in order to help control the gypsy moth population, which is why even when I was a kid, I was told, don't kill the praying mantis. They're protected, they're endangered. They're not. Praying mantises were brought here to eat bad bugs. And they do eat bad bugs. But unfortunately, they also eat good bugs. They will eat monarchs, butterflies. They also, unfortunately, eat hummingbirds. Yes, the praying mantis is large enough to eat a hummingbird. So I take all European and Asian praying mantises home for dinner. Now we do have a small little gray Carolina mantis that you'll probably not see around here, but see more in the Carolinas and on the coast. They're much smaller, and they are a native insect, so don't eat those. There are plenty of the green, non-native praying mantises that we can eat. A whole complete meal. Even some of our not true insects, like roly-polies. Roly-polies aren't true insects because they have many more legs than 6. You can easily find them in the woods under logs and rocks, wet, damp places. They're extra crunchy. They have a harder exoskeleton, but they're still good to eat, just like, I know it's not an insect, spiders, tarantulas, wolf spiders here in our backyards are big enough to be eaten. They are better to be roasted so that the hair and the little bumps on the outside come right off, and then you have a good meal. Even if you're somewhere near a creek or a pond where there are dragonflies living in the water, mayflies in the water, even water boatmans and predaceous diving beetles. They're all edible, and you can eat those bugs who will taste a little bit more like pond water. In a good way, pond water. They have that flavor to them. August is what I often refer to as insect month. It's when the grasshoppers and the crickets and the katydids are in their full adult mode where they're singing, and it gets noisy in August with all those adult insects out there. You might hear this katydid who looks like the leaf. You usually hear it before you see it saying, katydid, katydidn't. If you can catch them, they're edible. Any insect that you see that has a point coming out of its abdomen, that is an ovipositor. Okay? It's what the female has. It's one way to tell the difference between a male and a female insect. And it's what she uses to lay her eggs. Well, it could be a bonus day if you're eating a female insect who has not laid her eggs yet. You get even more protein from that insect. Grasshoppers come in all different colors and sizes, from greens and blacks. Occasionally, grasshoppers will actually go crazy and hatch out in large numbers, just like the periodic cicada, but it usually happens more based on the weather. A perfect storm or lack of storm and heat will produce more grasshoppers. So easy to catch, lots of them out in a field. Although there is one grasshopper who is red in color. This is the laugher grasshopper. If you're thinking what I was thinking the first time I saw this grasshopper when I went to Florida to visit my mother who had moved there, and I thought, oh, look at all those big, huge grasshoppers. I'm gonna eat good this week. Until I looked closely and saw that they were red in color. Yep, they're poisonous. Didn't get to eat any of those grasshoppers. They continued to live their life. So pay attention to those insects. Even though when you cook the edible grasshoppers and you put them in a hot pan, they will turn red, just like lobsters and crayfish. If they start their life off red, don't eat them. And every type of cricket, whether it's a cricket that lives in the woods, field crickets, grass crickets, fancy winged crickets, lace-winged crickets, our most common field cricket, they're all edible. The hard part is catching them. Why is it important for us to eat insects? Because, well, we can take and raise millions of insects in a small area. And those insects, like the mealworms and crickets that I raise, they don't require water. They don't require pastures to feed on, like the cows and the chickens do out there. They don't put out methane gas like the cows put out. And it's cheaper. And they're good for us that way. They've even started taking insects, roasting them, grinding them up, and turning them into flour. And then making pasta out of that flour. Or better yet, a power bar. Like a granola bar, but more power, more protein, if it has grubs and crickets in it. If you're having a cupcake or ice cream, I always find that the mealworms make nice sprinkles on top of them. If you were going to the movies down in South America, you don't get a bucket of popcorn to eat, you get a bucket of mealworms to eat. Freshly roasted at the movie theater. The mealworm is the larva of the darkling beetle. Remember, the beetle has the hard exoskeleton. We don't eat the beetle. We can eat the pupa here where it's transforming into the beetle. But when I raise them, I like to keep the pupas around because you have to have a few of the adults to lay more eggs so that you end up with more mealworms for dinner. So we're going to cook up some of those mealworms. We're going to cook up some of those crickets right now. All right, so now I have my living crickets and my living mealworms here. The pot and the pan, no oil, no flavorings added. I'm gonna start off with the crickets because they take a little longer. They're a little meatier and hardier than the mealworms. But when I cook the crickets, I always have to be careful because they like to jump out. That's why I have the handy lid. And those of you who are here, if any jump out, help me pick them up and feel free to just throw them back in the cricket bucket. Okay? There's no 5-second rule when it comes to bugs. Just pick it up, put it back in the bucket back there.
Be free. Jump. Go, go. Be free. Be free, my friends. Be free. Oh, go, 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 go.
I'll get them back in the pot.
No, you won't. I can't catch.
And once they hit that pot, you can see through my nice lid.
Sorry.
And then all you have to do is keep them moving, keep them nice and hot there. every now and then I'll come in and I'll test them. We want to make sure that they are cooked. We don't want gushy crickets. I have eaten a raw cricket and a raw mealworm before, and they really don't taste good. They taste like guts. When you roast the insects, it actually brings out the natural oils in the insect, which is what gives it that wonderful flavor to them. Whether it's a nutty flavor, some people say crickets taste like chicken, but they kind of say that about everything. You know, what do frog legs taste like? Chicken. I always joke and say, no, chicken tastes like frog legs. Most of you just have never eaten frog legs to know that. I think crickets taste like crickets. Mealworms taste like mealworms. They all have their unique flavor. We'll just keep them moving. You can notice how some of the legs are already starting to fall off of them. And we'll just make sure I don't burn them. That's the key thing. That's why I like to flip and move them. Don't worry, they're all dead already in there. As we heat up the pan, because the mealworms aren't going to jump out, but the mealworms are going to do what I call the mealworm dance. They're going to wiggle and wiggle in this pan. And then they're going to actually act like popcorn. Stop if we listen closely, the moisture will start to leave, just like the moisture leaves the kernel of a corn when we're popping it. And so they might pop, so you might end up in the splatter zone back here. Sorry.
It doesn't take long.
Oh, no, it doesn't take long.
It's like, boom, done.
Someday on the Food Network, edible insects, all wild foods.
Do they turn a different color?
They don't.
They just
Nope.
stay the way they are.
And now you're going to think that they're moving again, but it's not. It's the moisture leaving their
Okay.
body, which is going to cause them to. If we had smell-o-vision, you would begin to smell the nice nutty flavor coming off of them. Yes.
So how do you know when they're done?
Well, you do what my grandmother taught me.
Throw it
You
on the
taste
wall.
test. That's spaghetti.
Well,
They're close. See, I told you they
I
pop
know
and you'd
they
be in the
do.
splatter zone. Don't lie. Just like they taste yummy. And with the crickets, you can taste test them, but also to tell if they're done, you poke them, you push them like if you were cooking a steak.
so how many of these, like for a meal, would you like cook a bunch and just mix it with vegetables?
Yeah, you can. They actually act like tofu if you add. I knew you'd like that.
Don't you?
If you add oil and other flavorings to it, they kind of just soak up
Soak
all
up the
those wonderful
flavorings.
different
Okay.
flavorings and everything. I mean, I could put these two things together and have a good meal there.
Okay.
Those are done.
You ready, Chelsea?
And these will just take another moment here because they're still a little soft. We'll crank the heat up now on the.
Okay. All right.
All right. Chelsea's
Just
gonna
any of
eat
them.
it.
Any of them. They're all
They're
good.
all done.
Okay,
They all
Chelsea,
came out
do
of
it,
the-
do it,
Yeah.
do it.
Are they crunchy?
They're a little crunchy. Some people say they taste like puffed rice.
Sort of have a almost like buttery taste.
Oh, you do.
Some people say pistachios,
Yeah, I can see that.
sunflower seeds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they definitely have a
They
nutty.
do have a
No.
sort
nice.
of like when you brown butter and it
Yeah.
gets that.
Oh, that wonderful nutty
Yeah,
flavor
yeah.
on brown butter. Yeah, I can see where.
Stop it.
I can definitely see where you got the brown butter taste.
Yeah, that nutty.
No,
Yeah.
she's gonna
I'll
eat
go for
another one.
Definitely.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they're pretty good. They're very nutty.
If you go for a third one.
She will.
You did you taste
And they're like
those?
potato chips. You can't eat just one.
Did you try
You have
th-
to eat.
those?
I don't
A
think they're
bunch.
done yet.
They're almost ready here. Hold on. They're good.
This could be more of a challenge.
You can always wash the cricket down with a mealworm.
That's true. All right.
You
Go
ready?
for it.
You do it. Go. Here
Are
they
you ready
are.
to watch me?
Do it.
All right. I'm gonna have to like close my eyes because they just look weird. No,
Nothing.
I think I see a cricket.
Shh, let him go. No, let her go. Let her go. Darn it.
Yeah, they're sort of nutty in a different way.
They are.
More mild. Yeah,
I think so too.
they're not as rich tasting. Like these have that richness to them.
You're working your way up to the Madagascar hissing
No, you
cockroach.
will not. I had those as
We
pets.
had
I
them
know,
as pets
I
at the
know,
library
I
for a while.
remember.
No.
Weren't they named after the Beatles?
Yes, they were. All right, my last mealworm. They're good, guys. Seriously, you should try them.
Thank you for being a good sport and
No
eating them
problem.
and
Thanks for
letting
cooking them.
everyone know that they do really taste
They
as good as
really
I
do.
say they do.
Yeah, she's not making it up.
Yeah, well.
They're wonderful. It's the food of the future. It
No,
helps
it's
the
not.
environment, high in protein, low in fats and carbohydrates.
We'll embrace the bug.
That's right.
I
All right.
will believe
Stay
you.
away from the red ones.
I will. Okay. All right.
Thank you for coming, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
Outside, my friend. Be free.